But the next day came very brightly, and that new house of his was so delightful to behold that he forgot his terrors. One day followed another, and Kiawe dwelt there in perpetual joy. He had his place on the back porch. It was there he ate and lived and read the stories in the Honolulu newspapers. But when anyone came by, they would go in and view the chambers and the pictures, and the fame of the house went far and wide. It was called Kahale Nui, the great house in all Kona. And sometimes the bright house, for Kiawe kept a servant who was all day dusting and furbishing. And the glass and the gilt and the fine stuffs and the pictures shone as bright as the morning. As for Kiawe himself, he could not walk in the chambers without singing. His heart was so enlarged, and when ships sailed by upon the sea, he would fly his colours on the mast. So time went by, until one day Kiawe went upon a visit as far as Kailua to certain of his friends. There he was well feasted, and left as soon as he could the next morning, and rowed hard, for he was impatient to behold his beautiful house. And besides, the night then coming on was the night in which the dead of old days go abroad in the sides of Kona. And having already meddled with the devil, he was the more chary of meeting with the dead. A little beyond Honaunau, looking far ahead, he was aware of a woman bathing in the edge of the sea, and she seemed a well-grown girl, but he thought no more of it. Then he saw her white shift flutter as she put it on, and then her red holoku. And by the time he came abreast of her, she was done with her toilet and had come up from the sea and stood by the trackside in her red holoku. And she was all freshened with the bath, and her eyes shone and were kind. Now Kiawe no sooner beheld her than he drew rein. "I thought I knew everyone in this country," said he. "How comes it that I do not know you?" "I am Kokua, daughter of Keanu," said the girl, "and I have just returned from Oahu." "Who are you?" "I will tell you who I am in a little," said Kiawe, dismounting from his horse, "but not now, for I have a thought in my mind, and if you knew who I was, you might have heard of me, and would not give me a true answer. But tell me, first of all, one thing. Are you married?" At this, Kokua laughed out loud. "It is you who ask questions," she said. "Are you married yourself?" "Indeed, Kokua, I am not," replied Kiawe, "and never thought to be until this hour. But here is the plain truth. I have met you here at the roadside, and I saw your eyes, which are like the stars, and my heart went to you as swift as a bird. And so now, if you want none of me, say so, and I will go on to my own place. But if you think me no worse than any other young man, say so too, and I will turn aside to your fathers for the night, and tomorrow I will talk with the good man." Kokua said never a word, but she looked at the sea and laughed. "Kokua," said Kiawe, "if you say nothing, I will take that for the good answer. So let us be stepping to your father's door." She went on ahead of him, still without speech, only sometimes she glanced back and glanced away again, and she kept the strings of her hat in her mouth. Now when they had come to the door, Keanu came out on his veranda and cried out and welcomed Kiawe by name. At that the girl looked over, for the fame of the great house had come to her ears, and to be sure it was a great temptation. All that evening they were very merry together, and the girl was as bold as brass under the eyes of her parents, and made a mock of Kiawe, for she had a quick wit. The next day he had a word with Keanu, and found the girl alone. "Kokua," said he, "you made a mock of me all the evening. It is still time to bid me go. I would not tell you who I was, because I have so fine a house, and I feared you would think too much of that house and too little of the man that loves you. Now you know all, and if you wish to have seen the last of me, say so at once." "No," said Kokua. But this time she did not laugh, nor did Kiawe ask for more. This was the wooing of Kiawe. Things had gone quickly, but so an arrow goes, and the ball of a rifle, swifter still, and yet both may strike the target. Things had gone fast, but they had gone far also, and the thought of Kiawe rang in the maiden's head. She heard his voice in the breach of the surf upon the lava, and for this young man that she had seen but twice, she would have left father and mother and her native islands. As for Kiawe himself, his horse flew up the path of the mountain under the cliff of tombs, and the sound of the hoofs and the sound of Kiawe singing to himself for pleasure echoed in the caverns of the dead. He came to the bright house, and still he was singing. He sat and ate in the broad balcony, and the servant wondered at his master to hear how he sang between the mouthfuls. The sun went down into the sea, and the night came, and Kiawe walked the balconies by lamplight, high on the mountains, and the voice of his singing startled men on ships. "Here am I now upon my high place," he said to himself. "Life may be no better. This is the mountain top, and all shelves about me toward the worse. For the first time I will light up the chambers and bathe in my fine bath with the hot water and the cold, and sleep alone in the bed of my bridal chamber." So the servant had word, and he must rise from sleep and light the furnaces. And as he wrought below, beside the boilers, he heard his master singing and rejoicing above him in the lighted chambers. When the water began to be hot, the servant cried to his master, and Kiawe went into the bathroom, and the Chinaman heard him sing as he filled the marble basin, and he heard him sing, and the singing broken as he undressed, until of a sudden the song ceased. The servant listened and listened. He called up the house to Kiawe to ask if all were well, and Kiawe answered him yes, and bade him go to bed. But there was no more singing in the bright house, and all night long the servant heard his master's feet go round and round the balconies without repose. Now the truth of it was this. As Kiawe undressed for his bath, he spied upon his flesh a patch, like a patch of lichen on a rock, and it was then that he stopped singing, for he knew the likeness of that patch, and knew that he was fallen in the Chinese evil. Now it is a sad thing for any man to fall into this sickness, and it would be a sad thing for anyone to leave a house so beautiful and so commodious and depart from all his friends to the north coast of Molokai, between the mighty cliff and the sea breakers. But what was that to the case of the man Kiawe, he who had met his love but yesterday, and won her but that morning, and now saw all his hopes break in a moment like a piece of glass? A while he sat upon the edge of the bath, then sprang with a cry and ran outside, and to and fro and to and fro along the balcony like one despairing. Very willingly could I leave Hawaii, the home of my fathers, Kiawe was thinking. Very lightly could I leave my house, the high place, the many-windowed, here upon the mountains. Very bravely could I go to Molokai, to Kalaupapa, by the cliffs, to live with the smitten and to sleep there, far from my fathers. But what wrong have I done? What sin lies upon my soul that I should have encountered Kokua coming cool from the seawater in the evening, Kokua, the soul ensnarer, Kokua, the light of my life? Her may I never wed, her may I look upon no longer, her may I no more handle with my loving hand. And it is for this, it is for you, O Kokua, that I pour my lamentations. Now you are to observe what sort of a man Kiawe was, for he might have dwelt there in the bright house for years, and no one been the wiser of his sickness. But he reckoned nothing of that, if he must lose Kokua. And again he might have wed Kokua, even as he was, and so many would have done, because they have the souls of pigs. But Kiawe loved the maid manfully, and he would do her no hurt and bring her in no danger. A little beyond the midst of the night, there came in his mind the recollection of the bottle. He went round to the back porch and called to memory the day when the devil had looked forth, and at that thought ice ran in his veins. A dreadful thing is the bottle, thought Kiawe, and dreadful is the imp, and it is a dreadful thing to risk the flames of hell. But what other hope have I to cure my sickness or to wed Kokua? What, he thought, would I beard the devil once, only to get me a house and not face him again to win Kokua? Thereupon he called to mind it was the next day the hall went by on her return to Honolulu. There must I go first, he thought, and see Lopaka. For the best hope that I have now is to find that same bottle I was pleased to be rid of. Never a wink could he sleep. The food stuck in his throat, but he sent a letter to Keanu, and about the time when the steamer would be coming, rode down beside the cliff of tombs. It rained. His horse went heavily. He looked up at the black mouths of the caves, and he envied the dead that slept there, and were done with trouble, and called to mind how he had galloped by the day before, and was astonished. So he came down to Hukena, and there was all the country gathered for the steamer as usual. In the shed before the store they sat and jested and passed the news, but there was no matter of speech in Kiawe's bosom, and he sat in their midst and looked without on the rain falling on the houses and the surf beating among the rocks, and the sighs arose in his throat. Kiawe of the Bright House is out of spirits, said one to another. Indeed, and so he was, and little wonder. Then the haul came, and the whaleboat carried him on board. The after part of the ship was full of haoles, who had been to visit the volcano, as their custom is, and the midst was crowded with kanakas, and the forepart with wild bulls from Hilo and horses from Kau. But Kiawe sat apart from all in his sorrow and watched for the house of Keanu. There it sat, low upon the shore in the black rocks, and shaded by the cocoa palms. There by the door was a red holoku, no greater than a fly, and going to and fro with the fly's busyness. "Oh, queen of my heart," he cried, "I'll venture my dear soul to win you." Soon after, darkness fell, and the cabins were lit up, and the haoles sat and played at the cards and drank whiskey, as their custom is. But Kiawe walked the deck all night and all the next day, as they steamed under the lee of Maui or of Molokai. He was still pacing to and fro like a wild animal in a menagerie. Towards evening they passed Diamond Head and came to the pier of Honolulu. Kiawe stepped out among the crowd and began to ask for Lopaka. It seemed he had become the owner of a schooner, none better in the islands, and was gone upon an adventure as far as Pola Pola or Kahiki. So there was no help to be looked for from Lopaka. Kiawe called to mind a friend of his, a lawyer in the town, I must not tell his name, and inquired of him. They said he was grown suddenly rich, and had a fine new house upon Waikiki shore, and this put a thought in Kiawe's head, and he called a hack and drove to the lawyer's house. The house was all brand new, and the trees in the garden no greater than walking sticks, and the lawyer, when he came, had the air of a man well pleased. "What can I do to serve you?" said the lawyer. "You are a friend of Lopaka's," replied Kiawe, "and Lopaka purchased from me a certain piece of goods that I thought you might enable me to trace." The lawyer's face became very dark. "I do not profess to misunderstand you, Mr. Kiawe," said he. though this is an ugly business to be stirring in. You may be sure I know nothing, but yet I have a guess, and if you would apply in a certain quarter, I think you may have news. And he named the name of a man, which, again, I had better not repeat. So it was for days, and Kiawe went from one to another, finding everywhere new clothes and carriages and fine new houses, and men everywhere in great contentment, although to be sure, when he hinted at his business, their faces would cloud over. No doubt I'm upon the track, thought Kiawe. These new clothes and carriages are all the gifts of the little imp, and these glad faces are the faces of men who have taken their profit and got rid of the accursed thing in safety. When I see pale cheeks and hear sighing, I shall know that I am near the bottle. So it befell at last that he was recommended to a haole in Baritania Street. When he came to the door, about the hour of the evening meal, there were the usual marks of the new house and the young garden and the electric light shining in the windows. But when the owner came, a shock of hope and fear ran through Kiawe. For here was a young man, white as a corpse, and black about the eyes, the hair shedding from his head, and such a look in his countenance as a man may have when he is waiting for the gallows. Here it is, to be sure, thought Kiawe. And so with this man he no ways veiled his errand. I am come to buy the bottle, said he. At the word, the young haole of Baritania Street reeled against the wall. The bottle, he gasped. To buy the bottle. Then he seemed to choke and seized Kiawe by the arm, carried him into a room and poured out wine in 2 glasses. Here is my respects, said Kiawe, who had been much about with haoles in this time. Yes, he added, I am come to buy the bottle. What is the price now? At that word, the young man let his glass slip through his fingers and looked upon Kiawe like a ghost. The price, says he, the price. You do not know the price. It is for that I am asking you, returned Kiawe. But why are you so much concerned? Is there anything wrong about the price? It has dropped a great deal in value since your time, Mr. Kiawe, said the young man, stammering. Well, I shall have the less to pay for it, says Kiawe. How much did it cost you? The young man was as white as a sheet. 2 cents, said he. What? Cried Kiawe. 2 cents? Why, then you can only sell it for 1, and he who buys it... The words died upon Kiawe's tongue. He who bought it could never sell it again. The bottle and the bottle imp must abide with him until he died, and when he died, must carry him to the red end of hell. The young man of Baritania Street fell upon his knees. For God's sake, buy it, he cried. You can have all my fortune in the bargain. I was mad when I bought it at that price. I had embezzled money at my store. I was lost else. I must have gone to jail. Poor creature, said Kiawe. You would risk your soul upon so desperate an adventure and to avoid the proper punishment of your own disgrace. And you think I could hesitate with love in front of me? Give me the bottle and the change which I make sure you have already. Here is a 5-cent piece. It was as Kiawe supposed. The young man had the change ready in a drawer. The bottle changed hands, and Kiawe's fingers were no sooner clasped upon the stalk than he had breathed his wish to be a clean man, and sure enough, when he got home to his room and stripped himself before a glass, his flesh was whole, like an infant's. And here was the strange thing. He had no sooner seen this miracle than his mind was changed within him, and he cared naught for the Chinese evil, and little enough for Kukua, and had but the one thought, that here he was, bound to the Bottle Imp for time and for eternity, and had no better hope but to be a cinder forever in the flames of hell. Away ahead of him, he saw them blaze with his mind's eye, and his soul shrank, and darkness fell upon the light. If you're enjoying these readings, please consider subscribing to the channel. It really does help a lot. And thank you. And the story continues in the next part.